When you hear the name Winston Churchill, what comes to mind? The defiant wartime speeches, that famous bulldog scowl, or perhaps the ever-present cigar? As with other historical figures, we now tend to view him more as a symbol or a force of nature than as a person, and we're not suggesting he was perfect or condoning all of his views by featuring him in this video. History is complex, but to get a better look at the man himself, let's examine the actual objects that he touched, carried, and relied on every single day when he faced the monumental tasks before him. In other words, his EDC. These items weren't just random accessories he picked up on a whim. Along with his clothing, they functioned in large part as his armor. They were carefully chosen tools that helped build the iconic silhouette of a world leader. And the most fascinating part is that they tell a story much more nuanced than that of the oft-repeated public legend. These objects reveal the deliberate personal choices of a man who truly understood the power of heritage, quality, and personal ritual. Let's start with the fingerprint of heritage, the signet ring, and the pocket watch. Let's begin with what was perhaps his most personal possession, his gold signet ring. Far from a typical piece of jewelry you'd find at a local shop, it was likely made by the royal jeweler Gerard, and it bore the Spencer Churchill family crest. It featured the Marlborough arms as a proud symbol of his lineage and his deep connection to the Blenheim Palace estate, his birthplace and the ancestral family home. You might expect a signet ring like this to be worn on the pinky finger, which was the more flamboyant style on the continent and a style often seen today. But Churchill chose to wear his on the ring finger of his right hand. It wasn't meant to be a flashy piece of jewelry, but rather a constant and sober connection to his duty and his heritage. It served as a physical reminder of the weight of history on his shoulders every time he lifted a pen or gestured during a speech. Next up, Churchill's pocket watch, a relatively well-known one when it comes to the timepieces of world leaders. In an age when the wristwatch was becoming the standard for most, and for military men in particular, Churchill remained stubbornly loyal to the pocket watch. His was a Breguet reference number 765 equipped with a minute repeating complication, which he affectionately nicknamed the turnip, likely because of its large and bulbous 18-karat gold case. It was a serious instrument for a serious man. The watch was originally commissioned in 1890 by John Spencer Churchill, 7th Duke of Marlborough, from the esteemed London watchmaker Dent, who famously made the great clock at Westminster, known colloquially as Big Ben, even though Big Ben is technically the name of the bell. The Duke bequeathed the watch to Winston, and upon receiving it, he carried it with pride. But why stick with a pocket watch while more portable and potentially more precise timepieces were coming about? For a gentleman of Churchill's station in the early and mid-20th century, it was a mark of traditionalism and gravitas. Whereas a wristwatch could be seen as a newfangled gadget, a pocket watch required deliberate ritual of reaching into the waistcoat to observe the time, which perfectly suited Churchill's methodical nature. As we alluded to, this Breguet had a specific function as a minute repeater. By sliding a small lever, the watch could be made to chime the hour, the quarter hour, or even the individual minute. Thus, it was an ideal tool for a man who worked through harrowing hours during the Blitz and other moments of World War II. A constant reminder of the time kept him focused and on task. In other words, Churchill didn't just use the turnip to tell time, but to command it. This brings us nicely on to our next pair of items, the tools of command, the cigar and the pen. No accessory is more synonymous with Churchill than his cigar, which served as his ultimate signature. More than a hobby, though truthfully a vice, Churchill used cigars as a specific tool for his public image as both a hard-charging leader and a man who appreciated the finer things. His preferred brands were Cuban, specifically Romeo y Julieta, still in business today, and the now-defunct La Aroma de Cuba. Indeed, while at one time Romeo y Julieta marketed his preferred size of cigar as the Clemenceau after the famed French Prime Minister, it became so associated with Churchill that the company later renamed the size after him, which remains the case today. Churchill preferred his cigars to be long in size and mild in strength, and he reportedly went through 8 to 10 of them every single day, though not always through smoking. He would sometimes light up, only to be pulled away by some other demand, and also had a habit of consuming his cigars by chewing them down to nubs, to the extent that his wife, Clementine, sometimes made him wear a bib. But while Churchill could certainly make a mess with his cigars, he absolutely hated getting tobacco residue on his fingers. To mitigate this, he devised a solution which he christened the belly bando, which was a small band or holder constructed from brown gummed paper, similar to what one might find today as a type of adhesive tape. This kept his hands clean and allowed him to gesture or write without messy interruptions, proving that even his vices were engineered for efficiency. While the cigar, held most often between his lips or in his left hand, projected that unflappable bulldog demeanor we all recognize, the instrument that even more directly shaped history was usually in his right hand: his fountain pen. In addition to his legendary speeches, Churchill was a prolific writer of books and memos, and he believed the tool for the job was just as important as the thought itself. Of course, he favored British-made pens from storied manufacturers. In his younger years, he often used pens from Maybe Todd, particularly a model called the Swan, and later from Anato and Conway Stewart. Typically fitted with gold nibs, these were not disposable items by any means, but rather precise, weighted tools that felt significant in the hand. He particularly liked the Anato plunger filler, or as it was marketed, the self-filling stylo, because of the large ink capacity, which made it the perfect choice for long writing sessions. You can actually see the results of this in the original manuscripts of his speeches, where his bold, flowing, and urgent handwriting tells the story of a man racing to lead his nation and the world through dark times. The weight of the pen and the feel of the nib on the paper created a physical connection between his thoughts and his actions. Rather than dictating his ideas to a secretary, he was crafting them with a tool that had heft and permanence. In an era of burgeoning mass communication, he understood the power of a handwritten word to change the course of a battle. For Churchill, the pen was only mightier than the sword if it was an exceptionally well-made pen. The silhouette of authority, the Homburg and the bow tie. While many American gentlemen during this era might reach for a fedora, and formal occasions still demanded a top hat, Churchill had a distinct preference for the Homburg. Featuring a rigid, rolled brim and a single lengthwise crease in the crown, this hat style originated in Germany, in the town of Bad Homburg, near Frankfurt. Even so, it was two British figures who would influence the hat's global popularity. First, Edward VII, who took to wearing it after vacationing in Bad Homburg in the 1880s and 90s. And then Churchill, whose near constant wearing of the Homburg helped to turn it into a global symbol of British statesmanship. Why did he choose this style over a fedora? Likely because he was conscious of how it would impact his silhouette. Whereas the fedora has a pinched front and a more casual, pliable feel, the Homburg is stiff, structured, and authoritative. It doesn't slouch or lose its shape, and it commands respect the moment you see it, providing the perfect middle ground by being serious and dignified without the overt pomp of a top hat. Moving from Churchill's head to his neck, we find perhaps his most recognizable sartorial signature of all, his spotted bow tie. It was almost always the same pattern, navy blue with white polka dots. This was a conscious, strategic choice on his part. Standing in Parliament, getting snapped by flashbulbs for newspaper photos, or being filmed for newsreels, the sharp color contrast and memorable pattern made him instantly identifiable to the public. In a sea of sober suits and plain ties, the bow tie acted as a point of focus and a flourish of personality that told the world he had arrived. Indeed, this style of bow tie would become so identified with Churchill that haberdashers of the time would occasionally market the navy with white dots tie as the Blenheim, in a nod to the ancestral Churchill estate. Now, personally, I must offer a light style critique here. While it was a brilliant signature, Churchill's devotion to this tie style became a genuine personal uniform for him, lacking variety and verging on self-caricature. Even so, I admit that Churchill was conscious of this, and rather than being a man who strived for sartorial variety, he used clothing as a tool in his arsenal to create a personal brand. For a more contemporary example, consider Steve Jobs and his black Issey Miyake turtlenecks. So rather than simply wear this exact style of tie, even though I happen to be doing so in today's video, the takeaway here is that we should understand the power of a signature detail. Whether it be a particular tie knot, a unique collar bar, or a well-made self-tied bow tie from a specialist like Fort Belvedere, which allows for true personal expression within a classic form. Finally, let's step into Churchill's private quarters, away from the cameras and the public eye. In his personal space, his accessories were primarily for comfort as well as function, though they never lacked that signature touch of character. First, let's consider his spectacles. Because Churchill suffered from poor eyesight, which worsened further as he aged, eyeglasses were a strict necessity for him. However, he didn't settle for just one pair to handle every situation. He commissioned specific tortoiseshell frames, primarily from the firm of C.W. Dixie & Sons, to suit his various daily tasks. More specifically, his lenses were crafted with differing focal lengths between the various pairs, and he had the temple tips decorated with either one dot, denoting reading glasses, or two dots for speech writing. Other pairs were used for things like sketching or painting, and playing cards. While these were functional tools, he ensured the frames maintained a dignified, old-world style that suited his face well. He treated his eyewear with the same level of consideration as any other element of his dress, because he knew it was a frequent component of his appearance. Now for perhaps Churchill's most relaxed wardrobe pieces, aside that is from his oft-worn siren suits, namely his monogrammed Albert slippers. After a long day of managing global crises, Churchill would retire to his country home of Chartwell and change into these comfortable house shoes. As with the Homburg hat, this style of slipper was popularized by another notable figure in British history, Prince Albert, husband and consort of Queen Victoria. As he was known for wearing slippers and/or court shoes with this distinctive cut, the style came to bear his name in the mid to late 19th century. Traditionally made with black velvet uppers and a stiffer sole than other slipper styles, more akin to a dress shoe, they can feature the same grosgrain silk ribbon of the closely related opera pump, but more often the vamp is either plain or features motifs made with embroidery. Indeed, Churchill's pairs followed these conventions. His first known pair of Albert slippers were a gift from a friend of his, the Lady Diana Cooper, and his were in black velvet with a monogram embroidered in gold. He came to like the style so much that he had subsequent pairs made, generally in deep blue or maroon velvet, and embroidered with his initials in either gold or white. Photographs of the time show that not only did he wear his Albert slippers at home, but even ventured out in public on occasion while wearing them. These slippers are an apt representation of the private individual behind the public figure. Undeniably luxurious and in some ways a bit theatrical. While personally I think monogrammed slippers are a very bold, almost operatic choice for the home, and a plain velvet slipper will likely be enough of a footwear flourish for most gentlemen, Churchill understood that with a man's home being his castle, he could wear whatever bold and unique items he wished within the comfort of his own walls, monogrammed slippers and siren suits included. Those are the 8 items that constituted Winston Churchill's everyday carry. What lesson can we take from them? Not that we should copy these items exactly, as we don't all need minute-repeating bragets or monogrammed footwear. Rather, it's that we would do well to surround ourselves with items that serve a purpose, whether it be practical, psychological, or both. Regarding practicality, choose items that you'll use regularly and opt for quality over quantity whenever possible. Psychologically, items imbued with heritage and personal meaning will ground you in a firm sense of self as you navigate the world. Much as Churchill did, when you build your own daily kit with intention, you're essentially building your own suit of armor. Which of Churchill's EDC items do you find most interesting? And would you consider adopting some of them yourself? Let us know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this historical deep dive into an icon's personal kit, give us some suggestions of other such figures for future installments.